I wanted to start, before I look at the questions that we still have, I want to ask a question for the panel, and each of you can answer it any way you like. What are some of the areas where you either see that a lot of work needs to be done, like we've hit some block and we really need to break through it with some innovation or whatever, or things that maybe you are aware of that you're very excited about that you think have a lot of potential going forward? So any thoughts about those questions?
I don't know, maybe just to break the ice. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Ray RLib version 1.x because we're seeing a lot of experimental features that are super useful and that, I don't know, are basically exist as an example right now. And I think they could be more tightly be integrated. And so that would be really cool. Yeah.
One question for Anna. You could maybe just type this in the answer panel. Someone is asking for the GitHub link for Amazon reinforcement learning or something like that. Unfortunately, the last few slides you had didn't show up in the video. So if you have a link there, you could add it in the question and answer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I will attach that link. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts about that very insightful question, if I may say? So one of the things that I noticed a lot when I was doing the training recently for reinforcement learning is there's a lot of talk about model-based training, but doesn't seem to be a whole lot of, broad usage of it yet, a lot of progress in that space. I wonder if any of you are thinking about that as a, thing that we need to be doing more, or maybe isn't going to be viable for a while, whatever performance reasons. I think you got into it a little bit, Eric, about the benefits of it.
Yeah, this is where the audio cut out. I think there's some recent advancements in model-based training. It's much clearly more working now than say 1 or 2 years ago. So, and we'll probably continue to see a lot of advancements. So, who knows, maybe in 1 year we'll all be using model-based for everything.
Oh, and what was MMO? Someone is asking what that acronym stood for again.
I believe it's massively multiplayer online game. It's like where you have a lot of different players in the world.
Yeah.
Basically a lot of agents, things like that.
That's right, yeah. I mean, we're thinking of reinforcement learning as one agent, at least in the sort of beginner case, but that's a huge kind of problem to solve when you have a lot of agents all working at once, or fighting at once, as the case may be. Someone is asking if we'll have Ray RLib running on ARMS, the ARM processor, anytime soon. I wonder if anyone's thought about that, especially the goal of scaling down to edge devices.
I don't think we have an ARM build, though. I don't think there's any fundamental reason we don't. I'm not really sure about that. Yeah. Maybe that's a question for the Ray general channel on Slack.
Yeah. Yeah, if you go to ray.io, you can find information about joining the Slack channel. You can find the documentation about Ray, find out about RLib. RLib.io will get you there to the RLib specific stuff as well. I have maybe a final question for Max as we're running out of time here, and that is, I think the example you showed is really great because it's visual. It gives you a sense of, a real problem in the world. And I wonder what sort of challenges you think remain to scale up, like I'll just call it a toy example for lack of a better word, for the one that you demonstrated, to like a real factory, like maybe Mercedes or something. What were your thoughts about what's left to achieve that goal?
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. So first of all, the factory grid I've shown is the actual factory grid of a customer, but I'm aware that there are much larger factories as well. But having said so, it's already quite challenging that way. And I think I missed a few questions. Maybe I can kind of answer one or two along the way. Like one of the reasons this is challenging as well is because this is usually in those factories a highly dynamic setup. So there might be other ways of approaching this, right? So you have classical solvers and whatnot, and that you could attempt to do there. But you don't necessarily have time, for instance, recompute such a solution, right? And the agents we train are pretty flexible in what they do, right? So if suddenly like a table drops or there's a new core on the table, the solution reacts pretty flexibly. So this is something that is quite cool about this approach, I think. And but of course there are challenges, right? So we definitely see that in smaller factory layouts. It tends to work much better, or like the convergence is much quicker. And as not only the factory size increases, but also the layout can be very complicated. So right, so you've seen maybe there was this big circle in the middle. This is fine, but you had at the top there was this little cross or something where nothing can pass each other. So there are like interesting bottlenecks there, and those are very difficult to handle, right? So yeah.
Cool. Maybe one last question for Anna, and then we'll quit for the day. But what I will suggest we do is leave the Zoom running for just a bit longer, so that those of you that have further questions can be answered by the panel. But just one last question for before we stop the video, and that's to Anna. I wonder if you can maybe give us talk a little bit about what you see coming in SageMaker or RLlib or any RL features in SageMaker that you're kind of excited about. I know you can't talk about stuff that isn't released yet, but maybe you can talk a little bit about kind of the trends that you're seeing happening and maybe even client usages of SageMaker.
Sure. So as I mentioned in the presentation, that there were a couple of new released features during last re:Invent. I included two of them in this demo. One is SageMaker Studio, the other one being SageMaker Experiments. But there were more than that that has been announced. For example, just to name a few, SageMaker Debuggers, where basically you can see it as try to get the tensor information during training. And for RLlib, that's reported as part of the tensor board. But you can also use SageMaker ways to use debugger to get into the information and status of this tensors. The other is the SageMaker Model Monitor. That's more about what you can do to manage and monitor your endpoint after the deployment. So it's more productional based focused. So let's say you have an application running on an endpoint, it's using RL, but you want to monitor the status of the incoming payloads. What if you are experiencing a very significant drift or like income data shift? And that's something, again, that's something general for as SageMaker offerings, but apparently they can be integrated with RL application as well.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks again to our panel. Sorry about the glitches. I hope you'll forgive me for that. We'll post the videos later today. We actually have them already ready to go. Look for the Anyscale.com/blog post about that. And I'll leave the video. I'll leave the Zoom meeting running for a few more minutes if you guys want to clean up any questions. And thanks to the audience for attending.